Imagine buying a first-class ticket only to be told you don't belong just because of your skin color. This happened to 16-year-old Madison Carter. But what flight attendants didn't know, she wasn't just any teenager. Keep watching. This story will shock you. The airport buzzed with activity as travelers rushed to their gates, luggage wheels rolling across the polished floors. Flight announcements echoed overhead, blending with the chatter of excited families and tired business travelers. Among the crowd was Madison Carter, a poised and well-dressed 16-year-old black teenager, clutching her first-class boarding pass with anticipation. This wasn't just any flight. It was her first time flying first class, a special gift from her father, William Carter, a highly respected businessman and the owner of the airline. Madison had worked hard all year in school, and this trip was both a celebration and a much-needed break. She had flown many times before, but never in the luxury and comfort of first class. Madison moved through the terminal, her steps steady yet filled with excitement. As she reached the first-class boarding lane, she noticed the contrast. The passengers around her were mostly older, well-dressed, and overwhelmingly white. Still, she remained composed, reminding herself that she had every right to be here. As she approached the gate, a blonde woman in a crisp navy uniform stood at the entrance, scanning tickets with a polite but robotic efficiency. This was Linda Collins, the lead flight attendant. Her posture was straight, her uniform immaculate, and her smile reserved for those she deemed worthy. "Welcome aboard, sir," Linda greeted an older white man in a designer suit, handing him back his ticket with a warm smile. "Enjoy your flight," she said cheerfully to a woman wearing a pearl necklace and carrying a Louis Vuitton handbag. Then came Madison. As the teenager extended her perfectly valid first-class ticket, Linda's smile faltered, just for a second. Her eyes narrowed slightly, scanning Madison up and down, as if searching for an explanation. A black teenager? First class? Linda hesitated, barely glancing at the ticket. "Sweetheart, I think you're in the wrong line," she said, her tone polite but unmistakably patronizing. She motioned toward the economy-class boarding lane. Madison blinked, momentarily stunned. "Oh, no, this is my flight," she replied, holding up the gold-embossed first-class ticket. "This is my seat." Linda's smile tightened, her expression shifting from confusion to quiet irritation. "There must be a mistake. First class is for premium passengers," she said, her voice dripping with an edge of authority. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, stealing glances at the interaction. Some exchanged knowing looks, while others pretended not to notice. Madison's grip on her carry-on tightened, but she refused to let the moment rattle her. "There's no mistake," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I belong here." Linda exhaled sharply, the frustration flashing across her face before she masked it with a forced professional smile. "I'll need to verify this with the system," she said. Without taking the ticket, she turned toward the gate agent, already preparing to escalate the situation. Passengers behind Madison sighed in impatience, some annoyed at the delay, others muttering under their breath. "What's the holdup?" a businessman grumbled. "Some people always try their luck," another passenger whispered. Madison felt the heat of humiliation rise in her chest, but she kept her chin high. She had heard these types of assumptions her whole life, and she knew that staying composed was the best response. But Linda wasn't done. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice but keeping it firm. "Listen, I don't want to cause a scene. Just go to economy, and we can keep things moving." Madison's jaw clenched. She knew what was happening. This wasn't about a system error or a mix-up. This was about who Linda thought should be sitting in first class, and who shouldn't. With a slow, measured breath, Madison lifted her chin, locked eyes with Linda, and refused to budge. "I have a ticket," she repeated, steady and clear, "and I'm not going anywhere. What happens next will leave you speechless. Will Madison stand her ground, or will Linda take things further? And what will happen when the airline finds out who Madison's father is? Stay tuned to see how this shocking encounter unfolds. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Madison Carter, a 16-year-old black teenager, stood at the first-class boarding gate, her perfectly valid ticket still clutched in her hand. Linda Collins, the lead flight attendant, had just told her she didn't belong. Passengers around them shifted, some pretending not to notice, others glancing over with curiosity. A few exchanged knowing looks, the kind of look that says, "We've seen this before." Madison could feel it, the silent judgment, the unspoken disbelief. Linda let out a sharp sigh, tapping a perfectly manicured fingernail against her tablet. "I'm sorry, but this seat is reserved for first-class passengers only," she repeated, her tone clipped, as if Madison was wasting her time. Madison took a slow breath, keeping her voice steady. "I am a first-class passenger." Linda's polite mask cracked just a little. She folded her arms and gave Madison a long, measured stare, as if weighing whether or not to continue pushing. Then, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, she said, "I'll have to verify this with the system." Behind Madison, an impatient businessman shifted his weight. He was in his 50s, wearing a well-tailored navy suit and an expensive Rolex. He sighed dramatically. "Is this really necessary?" he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. "Some people just don't understand how these things work." A woman in pearls and a cashmere sweater set chuckled under her breath, nodding in agreement. "She's obviously in the wrong place," another man whispered to his wife. Madison heard them. She always did. She was used to this, but that didn't make it any less infuriating. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her carry-on. A younger woman standing a few feet away, a fellow passenger, nudged her husband. "That doesn't seem right," she murmured. He glanced at Madison, then looked away. Neither of them said anything more. A flight attendant standing nearby hesitated. She had watched the interaction unfold, her expression uncertain. Her name tag read Heather, and she looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. But she didn't say anything either. Meanwhile, Linda was still deliberately delaying the process, her fingers tapping at the screen on her tablet, dragging it out, making Madison wait. "Miss Carter, I'm just checking to make sure your ticket wasn't booked incorrectly," Linda said, her tone condescending. Madison lifted her chin. "You mean making sure I actually belong here?" Linda's smile twitched. "I just want to ensure everything is in order." A soft murmur spread through the first-class line, passengers exchanging quiet words, some agreeing with Linda, others raising an eyebrow at the clear bias in her behavior. But no one spoke up. No one turned to Linda and said, "This isn't right." No one turned to Madison and said, "You shouldn't have to prove yourself." Instead, they just watched. Linda finally exhaled, putting on a well-rehearsed apologetic smile. "Unfortunately, there seems to be a mix-up. I can seat you in economy class while we sort this out." Madison felt the heat of humiliation creep up her neck. She should have expected this. She knew this would happen. But knowing and experiencing it were two different things. Passengers behind her shifted impatiently, eager to move past her, eager for her to just accept it and step aside. Madison's pulse pounded in her ears. She could feel the weight of their stares, the pressure, the expectation that she wouldn't fight back, that she would just nod, say, "Okay," and go sit in the back, where they thought she belonged. But Madison wasn't that kind of girl, not today. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her boarding pass, holding it up for everyone to see. "This is my seat," she said louder this time, "and I'm not going anywhere." Linda's fake politeness dropped completely, replaced with thinly veiled annoyance. "Miss Carter," she said sharply, "if you don't comply, I'll have to call security." A hushed silence fell over the boarding area. Security. A few passengers shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. Even those who had been quietly enjoying the show seemed to realize this was escalating quickly, and yet, no one spoke up. Madison's chest rose and fell in a slow, controlled breath. She knew exactly what would happen if security showed up. She knew how this would look, and she knew why Linda was doing it. Because a black teenager in first class was more suspicious than a white man in ripped jeans and sneakers. Because if she had been blonde-haired, blue-eyed, wearing an Ivy League sweatshirt, no one would have questioned her ticket. Because this wasn't about a system error. It never was. Madison locked eyes with Linda, refusing to let her bully her into compliance. "If you want to call security," she said, voice unwavering, "go ahead." Linda hesitated. Passengers held their breath. The moment stretched on, thick with unspoken tension. And then from somewhere in the first-class line, a voice finally spoke up. "This doesn't seem right," a woman said, her voice carrying just enough for others to hear. Linda stiffened. Madison turned slightly, catching the woman's gaze. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes. The woman folded her arms and looked at Linda. "The girl has a ticket. Maybe you should just let her take her seat." A flicker of something crossed Linda's face. Guilt, frustration, or maybe just the realization that this was getting out of her control. But she wasn't ready to back down yet. Not by a long shot. What happens next will leave you speechless. Will Madison finally take her rightful seat? Or will Linda take things even further? And what will happen when the airline realizes who Madison's father is? The atmosphere in the boarding area was suffocating. Madison Carter, a 16-year-old black teenager, stood firm, gripping her first-class boarding pass as if it were her last line of defense. Linda Collins, the lead flight attendant, had just made her threat. "If you don't comply, I'll have to call security." The words echoed in Madison's mind like a warning siren. Passengers around her grew still, waiting to see what she would do next. Some were uncomfortable, others eager to watch the drama unfold. A few simply didn't care. Madison knew exactly what would happen if security arrived. She had seen it on the news. She had seen it in real life. A young black girl being escorted off a plane, humiliated, accused of being where she didn't belong. She wouldn't let that happen. With steady hands, she reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and typed out a simple but powerful message. "Dad, they're saying I don't belong in first class." She pressed send. It took exactly 30 seconds for her father to respond. "Stay where you are. I'm handling it." Madison took a slow, calming breath. She knew what that meant, because her father, William Carter, wasn't just any businessman. He was the owner of the airline. Meanwhile, 35,000 feet above the ground. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Turner, a seasoned pilot with over 20 years of experience, was reviewing final departure procedures when his secure line rang. His brow furrowed. That line never rang unless it was urgent. He picked up. "Captain Turner speaking." The voice on the other end was calm but commanding. "This is William Carter." The captain immediately straightened in his seat. The name wasn't just familiar, it carried weight. William Carter owned the very airline he was flying for. "Sir," Captain Turner said, his voice instantly professional, "I need an immediate status update on my daughter, Madison Carter. She is booked in first class, and I have just been informed that she is being denied her seat by a member of your crew." Captain Turner's stomach dropped. He hadn't heard anything about this yet. "Sir, I'll look into this right now," he assured, his fingers already flipping through the flight manifest, searching for Madison's name. But William wasn't finished. "No, Captain," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You will not look into it. You will fix it immediately." Captain Turner knew there was no room for debate. "Yes, sir. Right away." Back at the boarding gate, Linda stood her ground, arms crossed, waiting for Madison to back down. She was used to winning these kinds of battles. Then her radio crackled. "Linda, report to the captain, now!" Her smug expression instantly faltered. Passengers whispered, sensing the sudden shift in energy. Linda hesitated before giving Madison a sharp look, as if warning her that this wasn't over. Then she turned on her heel and marched toward the cockpit. The moment she disappeared, Madison felt a presence beside her. It was the older woman from before, the one who had spoken up earlier. She gave Madison a knowing look. "I have a feeling things are about to change." Madison exhaled, nodding, because she knew her father. And when William Carter made a call, things happened. Inside the cockpit, Linda entered, her confidence visibly shaken. Captain Turner turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Is there a reason why you denied Madison Carter her first-class seat?" Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew better than to lie now. Captain Turner nodded toward the flight manifest, where Madison's name was clearly listed in first class. "You do realize who her father is?" he asked, his voice sharp. Linda went pale. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She had assumed Madison was just another teenager trying to sneak into first class. She had assumed no one would believe her over a flight attendant. She had assumed no one would care. She had been dead wrong. Captain Turner let the silence linger before delivering the final blow. "Mr. Carter is personally meeting this flight when we land, and he expects an explanation." Linda's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a reprimand. This was career-ending. Back at Madison's seat, passengers watched as Linda returned, visibly shaken. Without a word, she stepped aside. "Miss Carter, my apologies for the delay. Please take your seat." The silence that followed was louder than anything Linda could have said. Madison held her head high as she walked past her. Passengers stared, some ashamed, others pretending they had never doubted her. As she took her rightful seat, she glanced down at her phone. "Dad, I'll see you when you land." Madison smiled. This wasn't just about her. This was about every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And this time, they had picked the wrong girl. But this story isn't over yet. What will happen when the plane lands? And what consequences will Linda face when she comes face to face with William Carter? Stay tuned. Justice is coming. The plane touched down smoothly on the runway, but for Linda Collins, the turbulence was just beginning. As passengers gathered their belongings, stretching after the long flight, Linda stood near the first-class cabin, her heart pounding. She had spent the remainder of the flight in silent panic, knowing what awaited her the moment the doors opened. She stole a glance at Madison Carter, seated comfortably in first class, exactly where she was supposed to be. The teenager was calm, composed, and completely unbothered, her phone resting in her lap. Linda, on the other hand, was spiraling. Her radio crackled. "Crew, prepare for disembarkation." Then came another message, one that made Linda's stomach drop. "Linda, you are to remain on board after passenger exit. Management will be meeting the aircraft." Her face lost all color. Outside on the tarmac, a sleek black SUV pulled up right beside the plane. The doors opened, and out stepped William Carter. He didn't need to speak. His commanding presence alone was enough to send a wave of tension through the surrounding crew. He was flanked by two senior airline executives, their expressions unreadable. Passengers peered out their windows, whispering among themselves. "Is that? Oh, she's in trouble now." Inside the cabin, as soon as the doors opened, first-class passengers exited with an unusual quietness, as if they knew something big was about to happen. Madison stood up slowly, grabbing her bag. She walked toward the exit, her steps steady, and then she stopped. Turning slightly, she looked directly at Linda. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. "You thought you could humiliate me. Now let's see who's humiliated." Linda couldn't meet her gaze. Madison exited the aircraft. The moment she stepped off the plane, her father was there. William Carter pulled his daughter into a brief but firm hug. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low but filled with concern. Madison nodded. "I'm fine now." Her father looked at her carefully, then exhaled slowly. Then, without another word, he turned and stepped onto the plane. The confrontation. Linda stood frozen as William Carter walked down the aisle toward her. She felt the weight of every eye in the cabin. The remaining flight attendants watched, standing stiffly by the galley, afraid to move. He stopped in front of her. Silence. Then, in a voice calm but razor-sharp, William spoke. "Miss Collins, do you know who I am?" Linda swallowed hard. Yes, sir." "And do you understand why I am here?" Her throat was dry. "Yes, sir." William's expression didn't change. "Then explain to me why my daughter was denied her rightful seat." Linda's mouth opened, but no words came out. Because what could she say? That she assumed Madison didn't belong? That she had used her authority to put her in her place? That she never even considered she could be the daughter of someone powerful? Every excuse felt weak, pathetic, even to her own ears, so she said nothing. William tilted his head slightly. Nothing to say. Silence. The tension in the cabin was suffocating. Then William turned to the senior executive standing nearby. "Is this how you train your staff?" One of the executives, a man in his 60s with gray hair and a stiff posture, cleared his throat. "No, sir, absolutely not." William's gaze flicked back to Linda. "Then why did this happen?" The executive shifted uncomfortably. "We'll be conducting a full internal review." "No!" The one word cut through the air. "I am not interested in a review. I am interested in accountability." William turned to Linda once more, his voice unwavering. "You are officially relieved of your duties, effective immediately." Linda felt the floor disappear beneath her. She had expected a warning, maybe a suspension. But this? Her mouth opened in protest. But one look at William Carter's expression told her this was non-negotiable. "This airline," he continued, "was built on the principles of professionalism, respect, and equality. You violated all three." Passengers had stopped mid-exit, watching the scene unfold. Some whispered. Others nodded in approval. One woman, a first-class passenger from earlier, murmured, "She got exactly what she deserved." Linda felt the heat of humiliation creeping up her neck. One of the executives stepped forward. "Miss Collins, please come with us." And just like that, it was over. As she was escorted off the plane, Linda glanced around, hoping for a sympathetic face, someone to vouch for her. But there was nothing. Not even her fellow crew members looked at her. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, she took one last look back. Madison Carter stood with her father, composed and victorious. And Linda knew she had lost. But this story isn't over yet. What will happen to Linda now? And how will this incident change the airline forever? Stay tuned. Justice is just getting started. The video of Madison Carter's ordeal spread like wildfire. A passenger in first class had recorded the entire interaction, from the moment Linda Collins tried to push Madison out of her rightful seat to the public confrontation between William Carter and the airline executives. By the time the flight landed and Madison stepped off the plane, the footage had already been uploaded. Within hours, it was trending. The internet erupts, social media exploded with outrage. Justice for Madison trended within minutes. Retweets and shares skyrocketed as people across the country weighed in on the blatant discrimination. News channels picked up the story, broadcasting headlines like, "Teen denied first-class seat over race until airline owner intervenes." Airline scandal, flight attendant faces immediate termination after public outrage. Talk show hosts, political commentators, and celebrities spoke out, demanding accountability. How many times does this have to happen before people finally learn? One TV anchor questioned. Another panelist chimed in. Imagine if Madison's father hadn't been William Carter. Imagine if she was just a regular teenager with no connections. What would have happened then? The public wasn't just angry, they were demanding real change. William Carter takes action. For William Carter, this wasn't just a personal issue, it was a matter of principle. His daughter may have been the one affected, but how many others had gone through the same thing? Without a camera rolling, without a powerful parent to step in. He wasn't just going to fire one employee and let the story fade away. He was going to fix the problem at its root. The very next morning, William Carter called an emergency meeting with his top executives. They gathered in the airline's corporate headquarters, seated around a long glass conference table. The tension was palpable. William didn't waste time. What happened on that flight is unacceptable, and I want to make something clear. This is not just about one flight attendant. This is about our entire system. Silence. How many passengers have experienced discrimination like my daughter, without anyone stepping in to help? How many employees have internalized the idea that some people belong in first class and some don't? No one dared to answer. William leaned forward, his voice cold. We will be implementing immediate reforms, effective today. Sweeping changes over the next 48 hours, the airline rolled out one of the most aggressive diversity and anti-discrimination initiatives in the industry's history. Mandatory bias training. Every employee, from flight attendants to top executives, had to complete an intensive program on racial bias in customer treatment. Stronger reporting systems. A new passenger hotline was established, allowing customers to report discrimination in real time, even mid-flight. Passenger Bill of Rights. The airline published clear, enforceable policies, ensuring that every passenger, regardless of race, gender, or background, was treated fairly. Zero tolerance policy. Any confirmed case of discrimination would result in immediate termination, no second chances. Public commitment to change. William Carter didn't just want corporate PR damage control, he wanted transparency. He held a live press conference, standing before dozens of cameras as he addressed the world. The press conference, William took the podium, his voice steady but firm. I founded this airline with the belief that every passenger deserves respect, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or what they look like. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. That belief was tested when my own daughter was denied her rightful seat. A murmur rippled through the press. Let me be clear. Madison was not denied her seat because of a booking error. She was denied because of an assumption that a black teenager couldn't possibly belong in first class. Camera flashes erupted. This incident is not just about my family. It's about the thousands of people who face this kind of discrimination every single day. And that's why today I'm announcing major policy changes at this airline. Changes that will ensure what happened to Madison never happens again. Reporters fired off questions. Mr. Carter, do you believe this will set a new precedent for the airline industry? Mr. Carter, what do you say to people who think firing Linda Collins was too harsh? William's response was unwavering. What's harsh is telling a child they don't belong somewhere just because of their race. What's harsh is a lifetime of experiences like this. If we want real change, we have to stop excusing bad behavior and start holding people accountable. A round of applause erupted in the room. Linda's life after the fallout. Meanwhile, Linda Collins was facing the consequences of her actions in real time. She was permanently banned from working in the airline industry. She lost her career, her reputation, and became a cautionary tale. At first, she was angry, blaming Madison, blaming the woke culture, blaming everyone but herself. But as time passed, shame replaced anger. She watched the footage of herself, saw the disgust in people's eyes, and finally understood the damage she had done. For the first time, she realized that she wasn't the victim, she was the problem. Madison's legacy. Weeks later, Madison Carter boarded another flight, this time a family vacation with her father. As she stepped onto the plane, she noticed something different. The crew smiled at her, not with hesitation, but with genuine warmth. There was no second-guessing, no questioning her seat. Because now, things had changed, and it all started with one moment. One decision to stand her ground. But is this truly the end, or just the beginning of a bigger conversation? The story of Madison Carter is more than just an isolated incident. It's a reflection of something far bigger. How many people have been judged, humiliated, and denied opportunities simply because of the color of their skin? How many times has discrimination gone unchecked just because no one was there to hold people accountable? This time, Madison stood her ground. This time, she had someone in her corner, a father who wouldn't let injustice slide. But what about the thousands of others who experience this kind of treatment every day? Without the cameras, without the viral attention, without a powerful advocate. 1. Racism still exists, even in 2025. It's easy to believe that things have changed, that society has moved beyond racial bias. But incidents like these prove otherwise. Madison had a valid first-class ticket, yet she was still told she didn't belong, not because of a system error, not because of a booking mistake, but because of an assumption that a black teenager couldn't possibly be sitting in first class. And if her father hadn't been William Carter, the airline's owner, the outcome might have been very different. 2. Silence is complicity. Throughout Madison's ordeal, people watched but said nothing. Some passengers agreed with Linda Collins. Others knew what was happening was wrong, but chose to stay silent. It wasn't until the situation escalated that one woman finally spoke up. Her voice mattered, but why did it take so long? 3. Power demands responsibility. William Carter didn't just fix the problem for his daughter. He used his influence to change an entire system. He didn't just fire one person, he rewrote policies. He didn't issue an apology, he enforced action. He didn't cover up the scandal, he made it public, ensuring real accountability. The bigger lesson, know your worth. Madison could have backed down. She could have moved to economy. She could have accepted the injustice and let it slide. But she didn't, because she knew her worth. And that changed everything. So here's the real question. If you were in Madison's shoes, what would you do? On fire,